Hey everybody, this is Chris with inoLECT coming to you again from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And what we're going to talk about today is everyone's favorite topic, alarm screens. What I'll be doing is reviewing some of the more common alarm screens you can potentially get during a remote racking sequence. Those of you that are familiar with using our remote racking systems, I'm sure you've already seen some of the alarm screens that can be generated during the racking process. So today we're going to take our time and we're going to go through some of these different alarm screens you can get and give you a little explanation what's going on in the system when you get the particular alarm screen. The first screen we're going to look at today is the over torque alarm screen. Typically you'll get this alarm during the racking process when the torque set point is exceeded. So if the breaker is racked, let's say to the connect position, and at any point during that racking process you hit a hard spot either with the racking mech or something is blocking the path of the breaker in the cubicle, the torque set point will be exceeded because the system is constantly monitoring the amount of torque that's being applied. So if we exceed that torque set point, this is the screen you're going to get, and it simply states that an over torque condition occurred during the circuit breaker racking process. So keep in mind that during that racking process, there's variable torque set points that are being monitored. So whether you're in the middle part of the breaker racking sequence, or you're getting close to the connect position, or if you're coming out to the disconnect position, at any point in time, these torque set points that are being monitored can vary because the variable torque programming in the unit is only applying torque at the points where it's needed to be raised or lower. At any point in time, if we get any of these alarm screens, we always have two selections. We have home and manual racking as our option. So unless you're very familiar with the breaker racking process of the particular breaker type you're racking, you can select the home button and go get some support from your maintenance department to come help you figure out what's wrong with the breaker, what got it jammed up, what's stopping it from moving in the cubicle. If you're familiar with using the manual racking part of our system, you can go to the manual screen and you can enter torque set points and actually jog the system in either the clockwise or counterclockwise direction, so you can try to get the breaker in a position where you've actually cleared the obstruction. All right, the next one we're going to talk about here is the overturns alarm. Okay, so the overturns alarm condition occurs when the breaker racking process exceeds the number of revolutions that's programmed for the breaker profile. So for example, if the particular breaker that you're racking is 20 revolutions to rack from disconnect to connect, if that distance or number of turns is exceeded, say 5% beyond 20 revolutions, you're going to get an overturns alarm like it says right here. And the reason for that is because the racking connection socket could potentially become, disconnected, and the motor's just turning, and there's no way for the system to know whether or not it's actually racking the breaker. So that's one of the reasons the turns count is actually programmed into the particular breaker profile. So when the unit gets to the point where those number of turns have been accomplished, then the system is waiting to hit that point where the breaker can't rack anymore, the hard stop of the racking mechanism. And if we go beyond the programmed turn count, this is the alarm screen we're going to get. All right, the next screen we're going to review is the engage failure alarm. So this alarm is also fairly common, and when you get this alarm, it's always going to be at the beginning of the racking sequence. So we press rack to disconnect or rack to connect on the screen to initiate the racking sequence. So the first thing that the system is going to do is it's actually going to rotate in the opposite direction of whatever direction we want to rack, because there's an engage and set process that occurs to ensure that the breaker is completely in the racked out or racked in position. So for example, let's say you're racking a breaker to the connect position. You connect the system, you hit rack to connect. Well, the system is actually going to turn the racking motor in the counterclockwise direction at first to ensure that the breaker is all the way up against the disconnect position. And then once that permissive is satisfied, the unit will then pause and start racking the breaker into the connect position or turning the motor clockwise. So that being said, if the breaker is not completely in the disconnect position, or if for any reason the connection socket loses contact with the breaker racking screw, what will happen is that the racking unit will actually rotate about 3 revolutions, and if it doesn't sense that torque, it's going to give you this alarm screen. And it simply states that the racking unit accessory has failed to engage the circuit breaker racking screw. Confirm the accessory is properly connected to the circuit breaker. So likely, either your racking mechanism has to be engaged, it takes a little more force to push in so that it's actually engaging the racking mechanism, or perhaps the breaker's not completely racked out. If it's only racked to the middle part of the cubicle, then when the engage and set process is taking place, the racking unit is only going to go about 3 turns and then it's going to stop. Okay, so the next screen we're going to talk about is the power outage alarm. This is one you're not going to see that frequently, but it can happen on occasion. So here's the scenario. So you have a system that does not have the UPS battery backup option that we provide as an add-on for your system. So you're racking the breaker, it's in the middle of the racking sequence, and somebody yanks the cord out the receptacle and you lose power to the racking unit. Well, at that point, likely the circuit breaker is not completely racked to the connect or disconnect position. So when you get power restored to the remote racking unit, and you power the remote racking unit back up, this is the screen you're going to see right off the bat. It's not going to go to the home screen that you're accustomed to seeing when you first turn the power on. It's going to go to this screen. And it's just a reminder that during the last racking sequence, power was interrupted to the system, and that's so you can check and make sure that the breaker you're getting ready to rack is indeed finished racking to the connect or disconnect position. So even though this is not a very common alarm screen that you're likely to see, it's a very important one. So if you ever come to use the racking unit after any one of your coworkers have been doing energy isolation or racking breakers, you turn the racking unit on, and if you see this screen, whatever breaker you're getting ready to rack, you just want to double check that that breaker is completely racked in the connect or disconnect position. Okay, so this screen, applies to those of you that have our UPS battery backup option in your racking system. This is the low battery voltage alarm. So there's a preset voltage indicator that if the voltage, system voltage, when on battery power, gets below that set point, you're going to get this alarm. But the key thing to note is that the racking unit will complete whatever racking sequence has been initiated. So there's enough of a cushion in this alarm to allow enough power to complete a racking sequence. But as the note says, low battery voltage alarm, allow unit to complete any racking in process, discontinue battery operation, turn power off, charge batteries and or operate using AC power. So if the battery charge gets below the alarm set point and you need to continue racking breakers, just make sure the unit is plugged in. And I think this is a good time to note that the system is designed to primarily be used off 120 volt AC powered via an extension cord. So the UPS battery backup system is simply that. It's a battery backup, and its intended use is if for any reason power is interrupted to the building or someone unplugs the cord, this is the alarm that you're going to get when the battery level gets low. Bob? Okay, on this screen, this is actually your home screen and not so much an alarm screen, but what I want to point out is that communication failure indication, which you can actually have occur on any of the screens you happen to be on in the system. But basically what's going on with the communication failure, those of you that are familiar with using our systems, already know that when you first boot the system up, you get this flashing communications failure indication for about 20 seconds. And basically what is going on there is that the PLC and the HMI touchscreen are establishing communication between each other while they're both booting up during the system's boot up process. Once the communication is established, that's when you see this indication go away. However, if at any point in time while using the system, if you have the tethered version of HMI touchscreen control where you have a cable connected to your screen, if that cable gets damaged at all and the system loses communication between the touchscreen and the PLC, you'll have this indication pop up on your screen. Whatever screen you may happen to be on at the time, if you lose communication, you're going to get this indication. For those of you that have our wireless control option, if you get out of range of the base with the HMI touchscreen controller, you'll get this indication. So it's exactly what it says. It's a communication failure, but there's a couple of different reasons you could have your communications actually fail. So just keep in mind that that's what that's for. Okay. Okay, on this screen, it simply indicates that you need to connect the interlock. The selected breaker profile requires an interlock. So for those of you that use our system on breakers that have interlocks that have to be activated and deactivated prior to turning the racking screw, you likely have one of our accessories that does that automatically for you. An example would be those of you that have the ITE HK breakers at your site. So if you are attempting to rack one of these breakers and you forget to install and connect your interlock accessory, this is the screen you're going to get when you select that breaker profile button to attempt to rack that breaker. And it's simply just a reminder for you to go get your interlock accessory, put it on the unit, or put it on the breaker, depending on which type of interlock is required, and plug it into the unit, and that will clear this screen. We also have a corresponding remove interlock screen. So if you have an interlock connected to your system or an interlock accessory connected to your system, and you attempt to rack a breaker or select a breaker profile that doesn't require the interlock accessory, you're going to get a screen that tells you to remove the interlock. All right, this particular screen is user initiated. So if at any point during the racking process on your racking screen you press the abort button, this is the alarm screen you're going to bring up. So the reason we have this alarm screen in there if you press the abort button is, as the user, if you walk away from the scene and one of your coworkers comes in to complete the racking process, when they walk up to the racking unit, they're going to see this on the screen. And the reason we put this is so that everyone involved or anyone involved with racking breakers with our system will know that someone aborted the racking sequence, because basically what this indicates is that the circuit breaker is not going to be in the connect or disconnect position, because for some reason someone pressed the abort button and stopped the breaker racking. It could be because someone walked into the arc flash radius. There's a number of reasons where you may want to press the abort button, but this is the screen you will get, and that's a wrap. Okay, so that's going to about do it for our review today on alarm screens and alarm conditions. So it's very important to keep in mind that at any point in time you could have an alarm condition that occurs. It doesn't mean that there's something particularly wrong with the racking system. Usually the alarm screens indicate to you that there's a problem with the breaker racking sequence. Either the breaker racking mechanism is compromised, or perhaps there's some type of obstruction or some type of damage to a component. But the alarm screens are there to let you know if anything occurs that is outside of what you want to happen. So that'll conclude our little talk for today, and hopefully you'll join us again next time.